Let's rank some of the best and worst hiking and outdoor movies. I'm gonna cover some famous ones and a couple lesser known ones.
Now all you gotta remember is that everything will be okay.
I'm gonna judge them based off of two main criteria. Number one, how popular was it as far as like commercial success, influence, reviews, things like that? And two, how much did I like it? We're gonna start this off strong with Into the Wild. If you're watching this and you haven't watched Into the Wild, what are you doing? This is based on the book and true story of Christopher McCandless, if I remember his name correctly, basically getting rid of all of his possessions after college to go and live in the Alaskan wilderness alone. He was influenced by writers like Emerson and Thoreau, and if I remember correctly, I think there was some Dr. Zhivago references as well. I think this movie's great. I'm a sucker for coming of age movies. The scenery is beautiful, and that bus is like just iconic, and I love the Eddie Vedder soundtrack.
Society, you're a crazy breed.
I remember watching this movie when I was maybe in my early 20s, and I was already thinking about quitting my accounting job and hiking the AT and doing some other adventure travel. So this movie really struck a chord with me at that time in my life. And I think a lot of people misunderstand this movie in general. They kind of embrace the solo wilderness and those themes of escapism, which, you know, I get. I definitely did too. But there's another theme in the movie, which is, you know, isolation is not always great. We all need a little human connection. I like Emile Hirsch. I liked him in Dogtown and Z-Boys. I wish he would have turned into more of like a Shia LaBeouf level actor, but just never quite did. It was pretty commercially successful, I think. It has an 8.1 on IMDb, 83% Rotten Tomatoes. I still hear a ton of people reference this movie. I think they just got it right with this one. Shout out to Sean Penn. I think this movie is a classic, and it has to go up here on the S tier. Love it. Okay, 127 Hours. Another one of these true outdoor stories that, you know, really broke into the mainstream about a mountaineer who gets trapped in a canyon in Utah, starring James Franco. I thought this movie was good. I was certainly engaged. It was clearly an intense survival story and very impressive, you know, how he cut his arm off. But I don't think this is a rewatchable for me. I didn't really connect with the movie other than just being wowed by a great survival story. It was pretty popular and highly rated. We've got a 7.5 on IMDb and a big old 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm going to put this on, what do we say, B tier? That's a solid B tier. All right, next up, A Walk in the Woods. This is a tough one for me and might ruffle some feathers because my heart is definitely with the AT. This movie is, of course, based off of the Bill Bryson book and the true story of his funny pursuit bumbling along the Appalachian Trail. The book I think is great and did a lot to make the AT a household name, which was really important for thru hiking in general. And I think the movie was certainly well done. I like Nick Nolte and Robert Redford. And actually, my mom and I were at a birthday dinner recently and something got brought up about celebrity crushes, and my mom was like, Robert Redford in the 1970s. Yeah, there certainly were some hiking nitpicks in this movie. Some settings weren't quite right, and the gear seemed a little too light on them. It didn't seem like a real gear, but honestly, that's just pretty minor stuff. Admittedly, I do think this movie missed the mark a bit. Maybe it was just hard for me to watch being familiar with the AT and the book. I think this is one of the most commercially successful movies actually about hiking, so we got to give it some credit there. Ratings are so-so. We got a 6.4 on IMDb and a 46% on Rotten Tomatoes. I think this movie might be C tier, which, hey, that's not a bad thing. Much respect, Mr. Redford and Mr. Bryson. I still want to be friends. Next up, we've got Deliverance. Oh baby. This one is certainly iconic. It's a thriller about four men from Atlanta traveling to the North Georgia mountains for a canoe trip. There are a few huge pop culture references that came out of this movie. Probably the most iconic banjo riff of all time. Possibly the most like iconic mountain musical sound of all time. That and that squeal like a pig scene where some men did some things to another man that they shouldn't have done. The movie is set in North Georgia and has some beautiful footage of the wilderness and streams. I grew up a little bit south of Atlanta, so the setting kind of feels like home and away for me. I think this movie overall is very good, and for us to still be talking about a thriller from 1972 says a lot to me. Unfortunately, it was so iconic. I think this movie, more than any other piece of pop culture, stereotyped Appalachian mountain people as inbred and creepy. I've seen articles from citizens of Raven County, Georgia that still feel the impact of some stereotypes of this movie, which sucks. This movie is very good though. I liked it. It's got a 7.6 on IMDb, 89% Rotten Tomatoes. I think this should go up here on the A tier. Very good. All right, how about Wild? I think of Wild as the PCT's version of A Walk in the Woods, another true story, based on the book about author Cheryl Strayed, starred as our girl Reese Witherspoon, dealing with some personal struggles and then going off and hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. I liked the book and I liked the movie. Her story, I thought, had some real substance and generally focused more on her personal life than hiking. She was, dealing with depression and her mom's death, and I remember at times it felt pretty raw. I'm also a Cheryl Strayed fan, read a couple of her books. I think one was called Dear Sugar. It was like a collection of some of her self-help related responses from a magazine column, and it was really good. This movie was another one of those gateways, it sounded a little like I was saying gay, gateways for non-hikers to get into through hiking, and overall pretty accurate, I would say. I remember that toenail clipping scene, that kind of stuff does actually happen. It definitely helped give the PCT more national recognition, which is awesome. It's got a 7.1 on IMDb, 88% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm gonna put it on, I think, the B tier. Yeah, that seems about right. Good movie. All right, next up, The Beach. Do y'all remember this one? I remember actually seeing a list a long time ago that this was Leonardo DiCaprio's worst performance of his career, which, honestly might not say much. The guy's a pretty darn good actor. I feel like this is kind of like a hostile backpacker traveler version of Into the Wild. Richard, the main character, goes to Bangkok looking for an adventure and comes across this beautiful remote island and lives like in this pot-smoking commune of expats. Everyone seems to hate this movie. It's got a 6.6 on IMDb and a 21% on Rotten Tomatoes, but honestly, I kind of loved it. I saw this movie in high school, and the idea of just living in some exotic destination just really appealed to me. And I actually ended up teaching English in Thailand and living there for a couple years, so this movie might resonate with me more than most. I do remember the second half gets a bit weird where he starts doing that like video game thing in the woods, and some parts are definitely a bit cheesy. Overall, pretty fun though, and I think it has become kind of a cult classic for more of that hostel type backpacker traveler. So I'm gonna put it on the A tier. I'm sorry everyone, but I liked it. Speaking of our boy Leo Dico, how about The Revenant? Mistyped and misspelled Revenant. I think this is the most commercially successful movie on the list. It looks like $500 million in the box office, so yeah, it probably is. It's about a rugged fur trapper frontiersman in the early 1800s. I loved it. I think a lot of outdoor and survival movies fail to really immerse you in the wilderness, and this one really did that with flying colors in my opinion. I literally remember feeling cold watching this, and I remember reading somewhere that Leonardo said this was one of the most difficult movies for him to make because he was going in and out of freezing water and nearly getting hypothermia several times. I feel like The Revenant did for outdoor movies maybe what like Saving Private Ryan did for war movies. It just really raised that bar as far as storytelling and cinematography and just that sense of rawness. I think that bear scene is iconic, and him sleeping inside the animal carcass to survive. I think it's fair to say that this is one of the best outdoor movies. I'm gonna put it on the S tier. Love it. Okay, how about Jungle? All right, this is the 1981 survival story of Israeli Yossi Ginsburg, played by our boy Harry Potter. I really wanted to like this movie. I remember being really excited to see it. I've always been pretty fascinated by the Amazon rainforest, and for the reasons I liked The Revenant are the same reasons why I didn't really like Jungle. I just didn't buy into its authenticity. It felt a bit forced to me. I thought Nathaniel Ratcliffe felt a little underwhelming in it. I felt like the story had A or S tier potential. It's like this true story in the Amazon rainforest with a famous actor starring in it, so maybe my expectations were just a bit too high. It's got better reviews than I would have thought. 6.7 out of 10 on IMDb and 60% Rotten Tomatoes. I hate to do it, but I'm gonna put Jungle on the D tier. Notice I don't have an F tier just because I don't have the heart to do it, but I think Jungle belongs in the D tier. And the last one we've got is a bit of a sleeper, The Survivalist. I saw this years ago when it came out, not expecting much at all. It looks like it had a relatively tiny budget of £1 million, which is, that's about $1 million. I always find it interesting when a movie is this good on this small of a budget. I think Napoleon Dynamite was made for less than $1 million.
Can I try it really quick?
So I've never heard anyone ever talk about The Survivalist. I really liked it. It's a post-apocalyptic movie, but it's not like sci-fi-y. It's just a few actors really in the woods. It's a really simple setting, and it's got an interesting and engaging and at times pretty disturbing storyline. I felt really raw at times where you're just kind of like, oh geez, thank God I'm not in this situation. It really had some depth, especially at the end. It's only got a 6.4 on IMDb, which seems a little low, but it's got a big ol' 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm gonna put this up here on the A tier. Not amazing, but like a very good movie that I think deserves a lot more recognition. So there you have it. What did I miss? I might do another one of these, so give me some of your best, or actually some of your worst outdoor movie recs below. This is Chris Cage from Green Belly Meals signing off with, if you want any high calorie adventure meals, check out greenbelly.com. Peace out and hike safe, my friends.